But thank you for joining, everyone. My name's Henry Fowkes. For those that don't know me, I'm the Policy Public Affairs Lead at ERSA, and this is the latest online session in our artificial intelligence series. You can find the rest of the meetings that we've held on our YouTube, which I'll happily link in the chat. But this time we're joined by Seb and Beth from Beam. So without further ado, I will pass over to them now.
Great, thanks so much, Henry. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth from Beam, and we're going to be talking to you about Magic Notes, which is a new product that our own team and more recently external teams have been using for their frontline meetings. Start off just by introducing myself. So I lead product at Beam. So I've been working on Magic Notes since we started the project last year. Before that, I worked on building product, so the technology and tools that our own team of caseworkers use. We have a team of about 80 caseworkers who support people into employment. And prior to that, I worked in casework myself, doing frontline work into employment and then managing teams of caseworkers as well. Seb, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking time out your afternoon to hear from us today. So I'm Seb. I am a co-founder of Beam. And prior to Beam, I spent nearly my entire career doing support work, mainly with rough sleepers, people struggling with addiction, and also managing teams of caseworkers in that space. And I guess during that time, it slowly became apparent that a lot of the technology that was being brought in and being used by those teams wasn't just failing to make them more productive, it was actively leading to burnout a lot of the time. And there was a very memorable case I had around this where I was managing a guy called George who joined the drug and alcohol services that I was partly responsible for managing. And he had lived experience. He'd been in addiction himself. He'd rough slept for a number of years, gone through detox and rehab, and this was his first job on the other side. And so really he was focused on going out into homeless hostels and assessing people who wanted to go into detox and rehab. And when he started that job, we only ever got positive feedback on how well he was doing. He would make notes on pen and paper, and the feedback from the people he was supporting was that he was really empathetic and focused on helping them. But after about 6-7 months of doing that job, the charity we work for brought in a new database. And pretty much overnight, he went from just writing notes by hand to having to go back to the office at the end of the day and type all of them up into this database system. And on a good day, that would take an hour, but it would often take much, much longer. And pretty much before he knew it, he was spending 2-3 days a week just sitting in the office, typing at his computer. And the feedback that we had to give him began changing. He's still getting great feedback from the people that you're supporting, but you're behind on paperwork. What can we do to help you? And we had pretty limited options, to be honest, at that point. It wasn't really that surprising when about 6 months after this database came in, he didn't just leave that job, he left the sector entirely. So, yeah, I mean, sadly, I would say that George's case was about a decade ago. It's not just all too common. It's actively kind of got worse and become more salient as an issue since then. So you can see a couple of sort of big shifts really in the wider sector that we work in. The first is that I think really just year on year, we've seen more and more pressure on services to deliver. As you can see from that screenshot on the right, leaving the European Union and the funding that came with that has meant a lot of services are cash strapped. And at the same time, we're seeing more pressure on demand. And that's partly driven by this dynamic of local need increasing as you have aging populations and really basic human rights like housing becoming more and more unaffordable. And this has started to sort of trickle through, I would say, onto the front line. You can see on that graph there that the level of skill shortages in the social sector is much higher than any other sector. That means kind of low retention, staff shortages, skills gaps, and this phenomenon of burnout, which was talked about a bit when I started in the sector, but has certainly become much more salient since. So we want to try and answer this question, being really why we set it up, is to try and say, is there a way we can simultaneously meet increased demand on all of the services while improving the experience? And that's the experience of people who need support at a really desperate moment in their lives, but also the people that are delivering it to others. And so as Beth was describing at the start, for most of Beam's history, how we've done that is we've had a team of our own caseworkers. It's about 80 caseworkers, and we've built them technology which allows them to support a wide variety of vulnerable groups. So homeless families, rough sleepers, refugees, care leavers. In real numbers, that looks like just over 3,000 people supported last year. We did just over 4,000 assessments. And you can see some of the partners there on the right that we work with. But more recently, about a year ago, we started to embed AI into the tools we were building for the caseworkers, and we were just completely blown away by the results. Within a few months, we found each of our caseworkers saved a day a week in admin time, and that's continued to increase since. And off the back of that, have gone out to a lot of the government partners that we work with and also other people in the space and said, look, you really want to feel the benefits of some of these tools that we built for our own team. It doesn't just make the job sort of easier to do, it also allows them to focus much more on why they got into the sector, which is to support people. So the first product that we are building and currently have a number of different government partners testing is something called Magic Notes, which we're going to deep dive on today. And Magic Notes is really focused on providing instant and also customized assessments for frontline teams. And it works through three fairly simple steps. So the first step is that you record the sessions that you're doing with people you're supporting. After that recording is saved, you then get a full transcription of everything that happened in the meeting. So a list of people that are in it and also a breakdown of who said what. And then you get a customized summary that is based on the reporting requirements of that team so that you can quickly make any edits and then copy and paste it into your database. So to give you a slightly closer look at how that works, this is the login screen for Magic Notes. And perhaps one of the first things that jumps out about it is that it's really optimized to work on people's work phones. And the reason for that is that when we were doing the early user research around Magic Notes, it was pretty clear that a lot of sessions were still happening in person. And where that was the case, it felt really weird and intrusive to just open up your laptop and have that between you and the person you're trying to have this conversation with. But having your phone out just there on the table, it's not that obstructive, it's easy to forget about. So it's a web application. It does work on people's computers as well, but we see it being used most often on people's phones. So you log in via your work phone. When you are ready to start the session, you hit this record button, and you then need to do three things. The first is you need to make sure everyone consents to be recorded. That's really important. You then do a round of introductions, so the technology knows who is speaking at any one point, and you also need to keep your phone unlocked during the session. You hit start recording. The microphone here lets you know that it's picking up the audio. If you need to, you can pause and jump back in, and after you're done, you click save. It then takes somewhere between sort of 2 to 10 minutes to process that, and that depends on how long the recording was. At that point, the user will get an email with a link, and they can open up the Magic Note, which we're now looking at here. So you can see we try to title the Magic Note based on what we think has happened in the session, but the caseworker can edit that if they want. And on this tab, they have that audio file they can download if they need to, and also the list of speakers and transcript. But really the focus is on this AI generated summary, which is structured around the different areas that that particular caseworker needs to report on. So this is an example here, but this can take any form you need depending on the type of report you have to deliver. In all cases, what it's doing is looking at what was discussed in the meeting and then grouping those discussion points under the relevant headings. And you also have a list of actions here. Just to be really clear on that, you don't need to sort of tell the application that it's recording, and actually you need to say, oh, one action is for Kevin to attend the group session on Wednesday. It will know if you've talked about next steps and sort of intuitively pull them out for you to review. So this is the first draft. The team will check it. They'll have different templates that we'll have built for them. So if you're doing a job hunting meeting, you'll want one type of output, but very different from, say, doing a care assessment. These are up at the top. And then for more granular changes, you can use this redraft feature here. So you can just tell it what you want to change, and you can give it multiple instructions if you want. You click redraft, the magic note will then rewrite based on what you've told it, after which you can review the updated draft. And when you're done, you click copy summary, and you can then paste it into the database. So just to be really clear on that point, it's not looking to replace any of the databases that teams are currently using. That would be, I think, a very big lift for most organizations. Instead, it's really a note capture and summary tool that does the heavy work around really writing up these often quite extensive reports that are used to document the support being delivered to people. Cool, so that's how it works. But one thing that's now really good to kind of have a closer look at is, well, what does that actually look like in practice? So I would love it if two people who were keen to volunteer would be happy role-playing a session. So one person's the key worker, one person's the service user. We can try recording it with Magic Notes and then seeing the summary it generates. So if you're up for that, please raise your hand. We've got some prompt questions, so you don't have to completely restart it. No takers? Greg Wendon, well done, stepping up. Would you have a preference, Greg, between whether or not you're the caseworker or the service user or customer?
If I could be the service user, if I've got a choice. If nobody else is volunteering, I thought someone should.
Anyone want to be the caseworker? That's the easier role, I would say, in the role play. Just asking a few questions. No, final chance. Cool. Well, look, Gillian, fantastic.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to hand over to Beth to lead this, and thank you so much for volunteering.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Gillian and Greg. So I've just popped on the screen some prompt questions that you can use in the role play. So you don't have to ask these in the same order, but they're just some ideas that the caseworker can ask. Obviously, make up the answers. Feel free to go off script. Feel free to try and throw some curveballs in there. I'll be recording on Magic Notes from my phone here. So I'll set that up now. And the first thing you just need to do is to introduce yourselves. So say your name and the role that you're playing in the role play. Is that all okay? Are you ready to go? Any other questions before we start?
No, it's fine.
I think we're okay.
Perfect. So I'll start the recording now. Over to you, Greg, if you want to introduce yourself first.
Oh, hi, my name's Greg. I'm hoping from this session to be able to improve my chances getting into work. I've been struggling for a while, and I'm really hoping this is going to help me.
And I'm Gillian, and I am Greg's caseworker. Do we just then launch straight in?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, all good.
So, hi Greg, how have you been over this past week?
I've been good, thank you. Yeah, trying to get stuck in with the advice you gave me previously. Hopefully it's going to, really make a difference.
Okay, so can you share with me a little bit about what you've been up to over the past week, any jobs you've been applying for, any of the other work that you've been doing around those actions we'd agreed last week?
So I've been in to see some of the local businesses near home to see if any of them needed any help on initially the part-time basis, to see if I can get started that way. And I had some positive conversations with people. I'm waiting to hear back from one of the cafes in town to see whether there's an opportunity that I'll be able to take up there.
Okay, I mean, that's great. Well done for being so proactive and just getting out there and speaking to people. As we'd said last week, I think that can really help to build your confidence and self-esteem as well, just by taking that step, which I know before felt like a huge barrier for you. You mentioned that cafe. Are they advertising, or is that just based on a conversation that you had that you're just hopeful that they might get back in touch with you?
It's a conversation. I know in the past they've had cards in the window. There wasn't anything there, but as you suggested last time, I went in to try and speak to someone. The manager was, but they said that they would be getting back in touch with me, so I'm waiting to hear.
Okay, well, I'm sure that it's made a positive impression on them that you took the initiative and that you went in to speak to them. So hopefully that will mean that they'll bear you in mind if there are any opportunities coming from that. What about the other applications? Obviously, you've been putting in a number of applications just as opportunities have come up. Have you heard back from any of them? Has there been any progress there?
There hasn't really. I got one that was a rejection. They didn't give any feedback though, so that was quite difficult to know why I missed out. But the other ones I haven't heard back from yet.
Okay, okay. And the ones that you haven't heard back from, was there any indication on the adverts about when the closing date was, or like when you would expect to hear, or even kind of sometimes obviously they list when interviews are likely to be?
So there were a couple of those. I think there's 3 that are outstanding. There were a couple that were closed at the end of April. Um, the other one didn't have a date on it in terms of the dates to know when to hear anything back.
Okay, and I know it can be disappointing when it's open-ended like that. We don't always hear back from applications if it's not been progressed to the interview stage. I know it will have been disappointing to get that rejection, as you put it, from that other one, but it allows you to close that one down and to, I guess, not be considering what happens next in terms of that job. So any rejection, as you put it, is hopefully just one step closer to you getting a job and getting a job in the field that you're looking for. How can we progress to thinking about what to do over the next week and what support I could be offering you in that? What's your job hunting goals for the week ahead?
I'm not really sure what to do next because, as I say, I haven't heard back from the applications that went in. I've been to speak to the businesses locally, so I'm not really sure where to go next, other than to wait and see whether I hear anything back from anything that's open.
Okay, and is there support that we can be providing to you around, skills development, participation in training courses?
Possibly, I'm not sure. I mean, it's understanding kind of what's on offer and what might help. As I say, the cafe job sounded quite interesting, um, but I haven't heard back in terms of if there's anything there that there's a gap in terms of what I've got. So maybe building up confidence on that before I really know what other areas to explore, unless there's a course that's really going to help me in terms of progressing a career in that sort of direction.
Okay, well, maybe we can have a further chat just around things like confidence building, but also things perhaps about like frontline customer service work, and see whether there's any of the training offers that we have that we could match you into.
That would be great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks so much, guys. That was brilliant. Can I get a round of applause for Greg and Gillian? That was fantastic. I really felt like I was in a real meeting. Brilliant. So that will just take a couple of minutes to process. So while that's whirring away in the background, I'll just talk about some of the technical details of Magic Notes. So the custom templates, well, with any partner that we work with, we create the summary based on what that team needs. So based on how their notes need to look, that might use different headings, different sections. That's bespoke to each partner. So we've got an example one, which we'll bring up in a minute with just a few headings there. And that will always pull out the actions as one of those headings. And as well as the summary, you also get the full transcript of the meeting breaking down who said what. Magic Notes is a web app, so you can use it across any device without needing to install anything. It just runs in your web browser. So whether people are using Microsoft, Apple, Google, Android, it'll work across all of those devices. And we primarily have designed it for those in-person meetings, as that's a big use case we focused on, but you can also use it to record phone calls or to record virtual meetings like we're doing now. And because the summaries just get copy and pasted across to any database or system that the team is using, you can use it alongside anything. Questions that often come up are around data protection and security. We're obviously working with quite personal information in these meetings, so this is a really big priority for us, and here are some of the principles that we approach this with. So firstly, we use what is called a human in the loop approach, where with all of the summaries that Magic Notes creates, the caseworker will be reviewing it, making any changes needed before it gets used for anything. So it's always having that human review it before it goes into the system. None of the data that Magic Notes collects is used to train any AI models in any way. The technology that we're using is all kind of private instances of the models that don't have access to the data on an ongoing basis. We also complete data protection impact assessments with all of our partners who we work with to make sure that everything's in place from their side and from our side. And all of the data is stored in the cloud, so nothing's saved on devices, and that's all stored and processed in the UK. Let's have a look how the Magic Note is getting on. It looks like it's ready now. So I'll just pop that on the screen. So we've got the title here, we've got Greg's job search progress and future strategies. I'll show you the recording and transcript first of all. So we've got the audio there that we can listen back to, or we can download that if we want to copy it across to our own database. And then we can see the transcript here, breaking down who said what. I've got me chirping in there at the beginning. And then for the summary, we've got our customization tools at the top here. And then underneath, we've got the summary. So we'll run through that first. So we've got activities completed last week. Greg has been proactive in his job search over the past week. He visited local businesses near Hope to inquire about potential job opportunities, particularly on a part-time basis. He had several positive conversations and is waiting to hear back from a cafe in town about a potential opportunity. In terms of his progress towards finding employment, Greg has submitted several job applications but has not received much feedback yet. He's received one rejection but didn't get any feedback on why he wasn't selected. There are 3 applications that are still outstanding, 2 of them having closed at the end of April, and Greg is still waiting to hear back on those applications. Goals for next week. So Greg's unsure of his next steps as he's waiting to hear back from his previous applications. He expressed uncertainty about what to do next beyond waiting for responses. And then training, Greg expressed an interest in potentially participating in training courses, particularly if they could help him progress his career in the direction he's interested in. He mentioned he found the idea of working in a cafe interesting and may need to build up his confidence in this area. Gillian suggested they could discuss potential training opportunities in areas such as confidence building and frontline customer service work. And then other topics, so we've got that Greg and Gillian also discussed the importance of being proactive and how this can build confidence and self-esteem. They also discussed the disappointment of receiving rejections or not hearing back. But Gillian encouraged Greg to view these as steps towards eventually securing a job. And then the actions, we've got Greg to continue waiting for responses from his open job applications. And we've got Gillian to discuss the potential training opportunities with Greg there as well. So I'd say that that's pretty good. It's captured most of what's been talked about, but we can customize it if we want to. So some examples here that are quite good to show. So you can get it to rewrite the summary using bullet points. So, you know, this would be quite hard to kind of skim through if I was a caseworker looking back on what I'd done the week before, because it's quite wordy. So we can get it to build that out. And then, is there anything else it hasn't mentioned that we could ask it to pull in? I could also tell it to break out the different job applications into bullet points for each one, so they're a bit clearer as well. So once you click redraft, what it does now is it goes back to the summary and the transcript and these instructions that I've just sent over, and using those, it will rewrite a new summary for us. And this will, you'll see here, it kind of typed it out as it comes through. So we've got the same headings again here, but it's just broken out in a way that's a bit clearer for us to read. So you can see here it's broken the applications out into those separate bullet points, which is a bit easier to read back through. And the rest of the information's in there, but just formatted slightly differently. So that's how it works, I guess, using the example of that conversation that we've just been through. I'll just talk next about what we found so far from teams using Magic Notes. The first finding we've had is around productivity. So Magic Notes really saves people time on needing to write up their assessments and their case notes. And what that looks like is that people save about 63% of time that they're spending on admin, and they're able to get that back to work on other things. The second finding that we've had is that the quality of notes and the consistency across teams really improves as a result of using Magic Notes. I think it's quite common for teams to have some people who are writing hugely detailed notes, some people who write really brief notes. Using Magic Notes across the team means it gets everyone's case notes up to the same level and that it is pulling through enough detail on what is needed. And the third thing that we've found, which is slightly softer, is that it also really helps caseworkers to increase connection with the people that they're supporting, because while they're running a meeting and recording it with Magic Notes, they don't need to worry about writing notes down and be trying to have a conversation while also trying to remember to write down the most important things. They can just focus on the conversation with that person and know that the notes will be captured in the background for them to come back to at the end. And we've just got some quotes here as well from users who have been using Magic Notes. Some particular favourites from me. There's one on here about someone's manager being really surprised at it being the quickest they've ever been able to write up their report because they were using Magic Notes. And another thing that came through in this feedback is, as well as it saving the amount of time to write up a meeting, it also means people are able to get them done earlier in the week, because, you know, previously if it was going to take them an hour to write up a meeting, they might find that hard to slot into their week, whereas with Magic Notes it only takes more like 10 minutes, so it's much easier for them to do it straight after the meeting and get that done before they move on to something else. Great, so we'll pause there now that you've seen Magic Notes in action for any questions people might have. And then after that, we'll come on to some of the kind of like future iterations of Magic Notes that we're looking at next. So if you've got a question, feel free to put your hand up, or if you prefer to send it in the chat, that's fine too, whichever you prefer.
So there's one question in the chat, Beth.
Nice.
How does the recording of software handle background noise?
Yeah, so we've with the recording technology that we're using, we've put some stuff in there so that it tries to dampen background noise, and that it will also, if there's anyone being recorded who's more softly spoken, it will also try and amplify their voice when it gets to the point that it's being transcribed. So yeah, once the audio is recorded, there's a bit of kind of like leveling that we do in the background after that to try and make sure the audio quality is really good, so that when it goes to get transcribed, that comes back as accurate as possible. I would say with our team especially, then they're not often, you know, in like a completely silent room, just meeting with someone one-to-one. They're often, in like a shared space, and there is a lot of background noise, and we have found it is able to handle it really well. Other question we've had coming through, are there any issues with strong accents, and what about interpreted appointments? So with accents, yeah, we have found that it handles accents really well. What we tend to say is that if the caseworker is able to understand the person, then the transcript will be able to understand it as well. And we have had, I'd say we've done quite a lot of demos like this where people really try and push it to the limits, and you'll always get someone with a strong accent who wants to test it out. And we have seen it perform really well. We've worked a lot on the transcription side, and we tend to see it get about 98% accuracy on how many words it gets correct. So it is really strong there. With interpreters and appointments using multiple languages, Seb, do you want to speak to how it works there?
Yeah, for sure. So it can both record sessions held in another language and then translate it into English, and also vice versa. So we had an example last week where we have a GP using Magic Notes. They'd held a session with a translator. It translated everything into English, created an output, which they then turned into a letter to send to the psychiatrist. So particularly within our own team, where we work on a lot of refugee contracts, that proves really, really invaluable, not least because generally the people delivering that support don't speak English as a first language, which is exactly why you hired them, and it takes them a very long time to then write up the notes. So we found that a really good use case of it.
Nice. Take one last one from the chat, then I'll come on to the hands up. So Paul has said, is it possible to trial the software to see if it would work for our service? Also, what is the cost for licenses for a full team of, say, 9 caseworkers? Do you want to take that one, Seb?
Yes, so the way we have structured the Magic Notes partnership so far is we've done them as an initial pilot, and the cost of that is defined by the scope of the pilot. If you're doing multiple teams, it obviously costs a bit more. And then past the point of the pilot, it's sold as a bundle of hours appropriate to the size of the organization. Why didn't we do it as a license-based model? We had pretty clear feedback that that wasn't what most organizations really wanted. Staff come and go, but if you buy a bundle of hours for the year, it kind of nets out in the end. So some people can use it a lot, some people less so, and they still get value for money. So yeah, that's all to say it depends on how many people are using it and how much you're going to use it once you're set up.
Great. I'll come on to people with hands up. So Kat, you've got a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because you've obviously piloted this and you're using it within your current teams, as it is a kind of recorded device and you're asking the individuals that you're supporting whether they're happy for it to be recorded, do you have any kind of information on what percentage of people have been happy, just to kind of get an understanding? Because I know some people will always be against it and not be happy with it, and a lot of people it's just part and parcel, especially depending on how, I suppose, the question is delivered to say, are you happy and this is why? But yeah, it's just interested to see the uptake from an individual's point of view, not from an organisation's point of view.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was something I thought we would struggle with. I thought like a lot of people they won't want to be recorded, but actually we've found that comes up very rarely. I'd say probably about 95% of the time people are completely happy with it, and it's probably just that 5% that people do have a problem with it. I think it is more and more common when you're speaking to a service now that things are recorded and people are used to it. And I'd say a lot of the time people also like it because it means they can get next steps much more quickly from their caseworker, and they can also feel confident that the record of the meeting is being recorded accurately. Gemma.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm just interested to know how long you store the recordings and the transcripts for, and if you can kind of go back and re-access them or not.
Yes, for sure. So we set that up based on the particular organisation that we're working with. So we'd set a retention period with a partner based on what worked for them. We have some partners that we're working with at the moment who want us to store everything for 5 years and for them to be able to access it throughout that time, and others who want it deleted after a month. So we can do it either way, and we have automated deletion in place for that.
Brilliant, thank you.
No worries. Any last questions? Okay, great. Seb, do you want to come on to some of the future versions of Magic Notes?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Beth. So I think that the way we're seeing Magic Notes, based on our own experience with our own team of caseworkers, is that it's just the first step on how you can use AI to make teams more productive and effective. And actually, you can really turn it into something much more powerful as time goes on. How does it become much more powerful? Well, in case it's not obvious, you're getting much higher quality data coming into your system on what's actually happening on your front line. So it's not typed up notes based on the memory or scribbles of the frontline workers. It's actually full audio files and full transcripts, which you can do a lot more with. So the two biggest things that we currently use it for in our own team are, one, picking up insights from sessions. So it looks at what's happened in that session and then flags to the caseworker, here are some things to be aware of. And it also gives them recommended actions and next steps based on what we know has worked around supporting similar people from similar backgrounds. So to give you an example, if you're supporting a rough sleeper in Southwark, it might suggest something like, oh, we've housed 80 rough sleepers in Southwark in the last year. Here are some housing associations you might want to call. So it's a bit like talking to another caseworker who's just very, very knowledgeable about all areas of the organisation. So at the moment, we're focused on building that out for the social work teams that are trialing it. And you can have a look at the prototype we have, which we'll build over the latter half of this year. So you can see here, you've done a care assessment with someone. This is the Magic Note as you would normally have it. And then you have this insights area. So it looks at two insights from that session. One, this is a local service you could refer the person to, and you should do that within 7 days. It can also give a package of care recommendation based on the needs flagged in the assessment. And then you flow into recommended next steps. So not only do you have a list of things which it suggests you do, you can also use these quick AI actions to say, draft a care plan, complete a referral form, book a time to speak, draft an email. So trying to turn it more into a kind of AI-powered workflow tool, which, as we were saying at the start, removes the burden of admin and just makes the job that little bit easier to do, both around planning, but also then completing the actions on top of that. So yeah, that's the prototype we're going to build for external users. And Beth can show us a little bit what that looks like in our own team at the moment with a dummy service user.
Great. So this is the internal tooling that our own team at Beam use, and this is John Smith, who is not a real person. So this is their case file generally, and you can see on here we've got lots of different tabs, we've got case notes, meetings, messages, and various bits and pieces that have been filled in. What we found with our own team a lot is that if they were going to go into a meeting with someone or call someone, they'd spend quite a lot of time going through the different tabs here, finding the most relevant information, making sure they remember everything about John before they speak to him. And so we've used AI to make that much easier for them and to get the right information in front of them, save them time, and also make sure that they're not missing anything. And we call that AI assistant Cara. So if we click up here, it will bring up Cara here. And for each member, once you open this up, you'll get a summary of the person whose case you are looking at. So for John, we've got a few different things here. We've got a general overview of who they are and what they're looking for, because we do both housing and employment service at Beam. Then got a summary of their support needs, and this breaks down kind of the background and whether they're like managed or unmanaged at the moment. So we've got here that John has a managed mental health risk and also managed substance misuse risk as well. And then these are adjusted based on where the person is in their journey and also what they're currently working on. John is currently job hunting with us, so we've got some info about how he's engaging with the service, so how he tends to get in contact with us, has he been responsive, and then he's job hunting, so we've got a bit of information there about what he's looking for as well. So he's interested in kitchen assistant and chef roles, and what he has been up to in his job hunt. So we proactively generate that summary based on all of the information we have with someone. And then the caseworker can also ask any questions here to get more detail as well. So I might want to ask, when did I last speak to John? You can send this through and the information will come back. I've obviously not been doing a great job staying on top of John's case here, as I last spoke to him in November 2023, and I had a phone call to check on how he was doing. And I can also ask things like, what are next steps with John's job hunt? And this will look at the conversations that we've had around what he needs to do next, but it will also take into account what we do at Beam in terms of employment support and bring in next steps there as well. So here we've got, I need to help him build his confidence and apply for jobs. You're planning to screen share and go through job search filters with him on Indeed. The goal is to help him start sending off applications and feel more confident about his skills. And you can also turn this into something a bit more actionable as well. So I might want to say, drop an email to John about booking in time to do this. And then it will put together, yes, we've got the email subject there, booking a time to review job search filters on Indeed. And it's put together an email there that I can just copy across and then send over to him.
Cool. Thanks so much, Beth. And yeah, I guess that was really everything we wanted to run through today, and hopefully giving you a flavour of how you can begin to sort of practically use AI. But perhaps the most exciting thing about it, I do think it paints a very bright future for what support work will look like in years to come. I genuinely think we'll sort of see this sector change more in the next 5 years than we have in the last 50, because this technology lends itself so well to removing the overwhelming burden of admin that has become such a large part of these roles, and turn it into something which is much more connected with people's internal motivations around getting into this field, which is to meet people where they are, have great conversations, and then offer them support. So yeah, thank you so much. We've got a few minutes left. If anyone wants to ask any more questions, go for it. I'll also just pop our emails in the chat, so you can also reach out to us that way if you'd like to talk further.
Thank you, Seb. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Julian and Greg as well. Fantastic acting performances.
Quick question from Stanley. Does Magic Notes doing any analysis and feedback to caseworkers for improving engagement or performance? Fantastic question. So yeah, we're building, that's the other big product on the roadmap for this year, is looking at how managers can use it to look at what their teams are doing. So again, as is probably clear when we demoed the product, you can begin to see as a manager actually how much frontline work is taking place, but more than that, what sessions are happening, how long the sessions are going on, and you can use the data to do things like, for example, sentiment analysis. You know, how happy are people in the sessions? How sad are they? You can flag things to a manager instantaneously. This was a very, very difficult session where the person was shouting a lot, and it doesn't require that frontline worker to call their manager and let them know it can happen automatically. So yeah, the two big things to build for the rest of this year are that manager view, which gives them a much better sense of what's going on in their team, and also the assistance for social workers. Cool. Okay, well, I've just dropped our emails in there, and thank you so much. I guess over to you. Oh, Gemma, you've got your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, just one last question popped into my head. Does Magic Notes at the moment have the ability to integrate with any systems or CRMs at all? I know you're talking about copy and pasting things across, but sometimes it might capture things that could maybe automatically update on a system in a reporting field or something.
Yeah, so we definitely like to build integrations. One of the biggest blockers on that at the moment is that a lot of the databases teams use don't support any integrations. You simply can't do it. It would be on that database company to offer that. I suppose the other thing we found, honestly, is that where the time savings exist, they're almost completely weighted towards the actual process of writing up the notes versus copying and pasting it into the database. It's relatively quick to do that part. It does take time, but it's a couple of minutes versus, you know, writing up an entire assessment from scratch. So yeah, the short answer is we definitely want to do it. We'll do it as soon as databases allow, but also we have found that it's still a very useful tool even without that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Cool. Is there anything else at all from you, Henry?
No, just thank you. Slides recording will be sent round to everyone registered. Yeah, thanks again, and sure we'll see, hopefully all of you at another ERSA event in the future. But cheers.
Thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.